Good morning. So, do you journal? It's really interesting, isn't it, how things kind of come into your life? Because I was talking about journaling just last week with Julie McLean, who's in the group. She messaged me to, she wants to do some more journaling, but I think there's a little bit of a lack of understanding about what journaling is. And she was kind of just asking me that question. So I'm always a little bit tentative about giving like a prescribed way of doing journaling, because I think over the years that I've been doing it, it's really important to find a way that works for you. And so I was having this conversation with Julie, and then Jess, another member of the group, popped. She runs wellness group herself, and she'd popped a post in that she was running a journaling challenge or focus, 5 days of journaling. And I thought, that's fabulous, which is why I've invited Jess to come into the group and invite any of you guys who are interested in doing the 5-day journaling process, because I cannot stress enough the value. Hi Dee, lovely to have you on. I'm just talking about journaling, the value that comes from journaling. Okay, I have been journaling close to 20 years now, but really it's only been the last 5 or 6 years where I've really connected with it in a way that's honest and genuine. And what I mean by that is, and this has been my experience of journaling, when I first started journaling, I was having some counselling, and any counsellor or therapist or coach that you choose to work with will often ask you to keep a diary or keep a journal, a place where you can just record your thoughts and your feelings, your reactions and things like that. And that's kind of it, really. We don't ever really get any clear guidance on how we should approach this. And it was only when I started my psychotherapy studies at the Burn Institute where we really were given some, not like black and white instructions, because it's not something that is rigid like that, but we started to understand the concept of journaling and what its intention is. And really before that, I had, I could step back and be really honest with myself, I'd kind of written my journal in the same way that I tell stories about my life. We get caught in these traps of not being completely honest with ourselves. And I know that I was doing that in my journaling. I would write kind of what I thought what I wanted to write. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's not a genuine reality. And I think, the big issue that we come up against when we are about to put pen to paper is safety and fear. Fear of somebody reading what we've written, but also fear of actually putting our own honest, genuine thoughts and feelings down onto paper, because all of a sudden that makes it real. Even if our thoughts and feelings aren't 100% genuine, which quite often they're not, that whole process of putting pen to paper and then reading about what you've written creates a layer of openness and genuineness that you can't ignore. And so that whole process of writing stuff down can feel very exposing. And I suppose for me, and this is the difference between when I know I started to journal properly for me, was I wasn't writing down openly, honestly, genuinely, because of fear of it being read, although I lived on my own, so there was no actual obvious evidence that supported it would be read. I know when I'm working with clients and I invite them to journal, quite often they will share stories of how they kept diaries as children, and that mums or parents or siblings read their diary and how exposing that felt for them. And so they have this kind of underlying fear of expressing themselves in a way that could be read. So that's a hurdle that we have to overcome, and sometimes we're not even aware that block is actually there. We're putting pen to paper and we think we're expressing ourselves, but actually we're not fully. So my experience of journaling changed when I started my psychotherapy studies. And you'll often hear me say that my training had very little to do with working with clients. Anyone who's ever done any coaching or counselling training, it is very much about you focusing on you. And only when you can really almost pull all your layers of skin off, because that's how it feels, can you truly understand yourself? And by understanding yourself and your own psyche, that enables you to be able to understand humans generally. So I started, as part of my studies and part of my assignments and my getting my diploma, we had to keep a journal. And what I noticed after about 3 months, we have to hand our journal in, it has to be appraised. And that's always in the back of your mind that this is going to be read. And I think for me, what I noticed after about 3 months was, firstly, I wasn't being honest about my thoughts and feelings in there for fear of it being read. But also I was creating this kind of super wonderful story. So there was that part of my inner child that wanted to get praised and recognised for this awesome journal, and it kind of read a bit like a bestseller kind of thing. And it was only when my tutor, Adrian Lee at the Burn, did a session on journaling that something clicked for me, and how important the process of journaling is. Okay, now I can only share my thoughts on journaling, okay, and how I approach it and what I get from it. So the first thing, if you're going to consider journaling, is to work through what might stop you and the blocks that might get in the way of you really embracing the process and being as honest and open as you can be. And that might be a thing that takes time. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with exploring and expressing. You've got to remember that we're so used to closing down our feelings. We're told as children not to feel, not directly. Some are told directly. I was told directly, but more indirectly. You fall over as a kid and you graze your knee, and mum will scoop you up and give you a big hug and give you a biscuit and say, there, don't cry. You don't need to cry. I can remember being really quite scared about dying as a kid, and I'd say to my mum about it, and my mum would say, don't be stupid. So my feelings were being discounted, and and as children we stop feeling because we want to please our parents, or we don't want to look silly, or we don't want to be discounted. And so this is how this stuff starts. So all of a sudden, as adults, we make a decision to start writing our thoughts and feelings in a journal, and actually that's harder than it can initially appear. So for me, when I'm journaling now, I'm a lot further down the line in terms of my ability to disclose. So when I'm journaling, I tend to journal every day. I do a lot of reflection in my own head anyway, half an hour every morning. I just sit and I just reflect on whatever comes to me. So I sit and I just think about, sometimes it's work, sometimes it's personal stuff, sometimes it's very specific to what's going on in my own thoughts and feelings, sometimes it's about another person, maybe a client I've been working with. So I do a lot of internal journaling and reflection anyway, but there's nothing quite like putting pen to paper. And so I will grab my book. If I've had a situation that's triggered me, I will grab my book and just spend 5 or 10 minutes on it. Some people want to sit and write for half an hour. That's great, but sometimes you don't have the time capacity for that. So I'm more, because I journal so much, I tend to find I do it in the moment. So I will grab my book and I will process something if I've been triggered by something, or if someone's upset me, or if there's a situation that I can't quite work through in my mind. I'll grab my book and I'll sit down and I will journal about it. But I don't just do that. What I then do is then I look at how I approached that whole process of writing about that thing. So it's kind of like I write about the thing, but then I also write about how I approached that thing. Morning, Jess. I'm just talking about journaling. So you might want to watch it on replay. I've just shared a little bit of my history and some of the blocks that can get in the way with journaling, which I'm sure you'll go through, but also how I approach it, and it is very individual for the person. So because I tend to do this so often, I now find that I grab my book if I get triggered or if something's going on that I'm kind of struggling with a little bit. And so I write about that thing, but I also write about the process of how I've approached writing about it. So this is the bit that helps to break down the fear of being honest with your writing. So I know there's times where I'll pick up my journal and I'll write, and there's very few blocks that are actually getting in the way, but there's other times where I notice I'm putting it off, or I'm not flowing when I'm journaling as much as I would. And that's really interesting to pick up on that, because that is an indication when you're not flowing, when you're putting blocks in the way, that's an indication that there's something going on there. So when you're journaling, this is how I do it. I write about the thing, but I then also look at how I've approached writing about it. And that I get far more from journaling and exploring how I approach things in my life than I do about the actual writing about the thing, if that makes sense. And that is how I approach journaling. Okay. I like to write. There is a lot of healing that happens through the physical power of putting pen to paper, but some people prefer to journal in other ways. I've got clients that do it through music. They write songs. I've got clients that do it through poetry. Artwork is a massive way of being able to express your thoughts and feelings. But for me, and an easy way to start is to grab a notebook and just start writing stuff down. But be curious about how you approach something. You know, and that goes with anything in life, you know, how we sabotage ourselves. What blocks do we put in the way that stops us? Time is one. You know, we're constantly saying we're too busy. You know, that is an excuse. Okay. And yes, it's an excuse, but when we start exploring that, the chances are there's some safety stuff going on there. Is it safe for you to write in that book? You know, if you're somebody who wrote diaries as a kid and somebody read them, the chances are you're going to be holding on to some fear and anxiety around that. But equally, tapping into your own truth and your own honesty and writing that down in its rawest form is bloody scary, because writing that on paper means that it's not secret anymore and you can't hide from it anymore. And so it's about being able to process that and work through that and build up the skills and the tools and the resilience that you need to be able to hold yourself in that space. So yeah, Jess, thank you so much. You came along at just the right time. I was just saying in the group that Julie McLean had contacted me last week talking about how I approach journaling, and then you popped your post on. I thought it'd be a really nice thing to invite other members of the group to join in with. So that's just a little bit of my thoughts around journaling. I cannot stress enough how powerful it is. But for me, it's been like a 20-year process. And for 14 years of them, I've kind of done it on a very safe and surface level. And it's only as I've been able to have the right coping mechanisms in place to support myself through that process that I've been able to access the much more deeper, genuine, raw stuff. Yeah. Looking forward to the 5 days. Anyone who's interested in learning about journaling and want to give it a go, remember there's no right and wrong. The fact that you actually even give it a go is kind of a step in the right direction. So Jess, I'm assuming you've popped a link into your group. Yeah, it's powerful stuff and it's free. Have a good day, guys.